Hey first graders, I'm super excited to share with you your writing project for this week. You get to write a story that includes a landform. So this week in science, you're learning about landforms. So make sure that you've already done the Nearpod for science before you start your writing, because that's really going to help with your learning. So your target for your writing this week is I can write a narrative text that includes at least one landform. A narrative is simply a story. So you get to be writing a story this week, and a landform can be a lot of different things. So here are some examples. It could be a volcano or hills or an island or a canyon, a desert, the ocean, the river, the jungle, mountains, marshes, a waterfall, plain. There's more, okay? There's even more than that. There's also this book that you should have read in science today, in EPIC, that will teach you more about landforms. Okay, so once you've done some of those lessons, you will be ready to do your writing project, and you get to do your writing on your own time this week. And all I ask is that you submit a picture of your writing to your teacher by the end of the week. Okay, so here's what you need in your story. This word is requirements, so that means what you need. So your story must include at least one landform. Okay, so it has to have at least one of these landforms in it. You get to pick whichever one you want. It doesn't matter. Just pick at least one, but it can have more than one too. And you need to have at least two events in your story. Okay, I'm going to be giving you an example of my story on the next slide, but you do need to have two events in your story. You also need to use words to help signal the time in which things happened or the order in which they happened. And again, if that's confusing to you, I'm going to show you an example in my story on the next page. Lastly, your story can be true or it can be totally made up. You can make up characters and places as long as you're including a landform in it. Okay, so I have an example for you. So up here on top is my story, and then down here on the bottom, I just copied the requirements from the last page, but I colored them so that you could see how I included them in my story. So first I'm going to read you my story. It's actually a true story. So like I said, you can make it true, something that you've actually done, or you can get really creative and use your imagination. So here's my story. Last spring, I got to go on a trip to Montana with my friend. The house we stayed at was in the middle of three beautiful mountain ranges. We had such a pretty view. One day, we decided to hike up into the mountains. We started in the morning and hiked for several hours to get up to a lake in the mountains. On the way, we saw several streams and we had to cross over a creek. After enjoying our lunch by the lake in the mountains, we hiked back down and drove back to the house we were staying at. Our legs were tired, but we had such a fun day in the mountains. So, now I want to show you how I included all of the requirements in my story. So these red words right here say, your story must include at least one landform. So look, I colored them in red too. I talked about mountain ranges, mountains, a lake, mountains, streams, creek, a lake again, and the mountains two more times. So I got at least one. I actually have three, four. I have mountains, a lake, streams, and a creek. Okay, that's four. And they were really easy to include, so you can totally get creative. The next one in blue says, include at least two events in your story. Okay, so let's see. I started with, we decided to hike. Okay, that's one event, hiking. And I also said we enjoyed our lunch by the lake. And I also said we drove back to the house. Those were three things that happened in the story. Okay, so it wasn't all about one thing that we did the whole time. It was about multiple things that we did throughout the day. Excuse me. Okay, the one in green says, use words to help signal the time in which things happened or the order in which they happened. So I want to show you some of those words so that it makes a little more sense to you. I started my story with last spring. Now you know when I went. It was actually a little over a year ago from now. Okay, so that's really important. If you're telling a true story, I want to know if it was a month ago or when you were 3 years old. I started, before I said we went on a hike, I said one day. So that means like one day when we were there, we decided to hike. I said we started in the morning. Okay, that's important too, to tell the time of day. And I said we hiked for several hours. That gives you an idea of how long we were out there. And then I said after enjoying our lunch. So after is a time word because it tells you that we enjoyed our lunch and then afterwards we hiked back down. Okay, so that's one way that you can include some time words in your story. You can also be more specific and you could say at 3 o'clock we did this, at 5 o'clock we did that. It's up to you. You can be more specific or you can be more general like I was. And the last one just says your story can be true or it can be made up. Mine happens to be true, but yours doesn't have to be. All right, we want you to have fun with this. You can choose, again, if you want to work on it a couple minutes a day or pick a good day that you have some extra time. So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoy it and take a picture of your work when you're done and submit it onto Seesaw so that your teacher can see it and give you feedback.